Well, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, today's topic on alternative kinds of typing paper came up as a result last week when I placed a visit over with my friend Ethan Moses, and I brought my Groma Colibri typewriter over there with me because I'm trying to get Ethan into typewriters, and he doesn't want another hobby or another rabbit hole of interest to go down in deep dive into. But anyway, I brought my Groma Colibri. I was test typing on some of this Southworth type of really nice quality 24-pound paper. And it makes a fairly decent imprint on the Groma Colibri. But Ethan had a couple scraps of Tyvek mailing envelopes laying around, and I just happened to grab a piece of his Tyvek shipping envelope and rolled it into the Groma Colibri and typed on it just to see what it might be like. And what surprised me was the fact that the typing was actually darker on the Groma Colibri than it was on this really good quality Southworth resume paper. And that kind of surprised me that Tyvek, a plasticky kind of material made by DuPont, would take typewriter ink so well. So that got me thinking, there may be some alternative surfaces here, materials that we can type on that might be fun. And then, maybe just a day later, in the mail, I received this envelope from Paul Hopper of Hemet, California, and he sends me a letter and some poems typed on these disposable papery hand wipe cloths. And so I thought, well, the universe is trying to tell me something here, and that's why we're doing this video. Stay tuned. So the Colibri is running a fairly nice ribbon, and it prints like this on this cream-colored, well, parchment paper colored Southworth paper. And this is what it looks like on this white Tyvek shipping envelope, which is noticeably darker and more contrasty. And I think that's pretty amazing considering it's water-resistant Tyvek. And this is the letter from my friend Paul Hopper, typed on a Smith Corona Riviera. And so this is typed on a wet wipe, and you can tell with the little rectangular folds that this was one of these tiny little packs that comes in a little envelope, and you tear it open and unfold the wet wipe. And he unfolded it and dried it out nicely, and it made a kind of a stiff papery material, and it actually takes the typing quite well. And so, well, I didn't have one of those little folded up packets in my possession anywhere around the house, but I did have one of these little hand sanitizer things. I don't know if this is going to work at all. Anyway, so I took one of these out. It was, soaking wet, and I laid it out in the sun in my courtyard table and let it dry, not knowing what it would be like. And it looks sort of Kleenex-y, kind of springy, actually. I'm not really sure if it's going to take any ink very well, and it does feel kind of cloth-like, but it doesn't feel papery like yours. Mine feels a lot more porous and cloth-like, so I kind of doubt whether it'll take ink very well, but I'm going to have to try it here and see. And then while I was looking around for some more alternative stuff to type upon, just to make it fun, I was out in the garage and I came across one of these dryer sheets. In fact, this was a brand new dryer sheet. I went ahead and soaked it, rinsed it under hot water to kind of rinse off as much of the whatever residue it is on here, but it's awful thin and gauzy, and I don't think it's going to take typewriter ink very well. This is probably just going to be a crazy idea that won't work. Another idea that my wife suggested is, what about these inexpensive paper napkins that you get from restaurants? And so I have a brown one and I have a white one, and so we can try typing on those. But again, none of these alternative materials are really going to be any better than regular cheap paper to type on. And what interests me about this whole thing is really the Tyvek material itself. And so my wife was out this afternoon, and I had her stop by my Staples, and she bought a pack of 9 by 12 inch DuPont Tyvek Easy Close envelopes. And I'm going to try taking some of these out and using it as typing paper. The idea being that maybe there's some particular property of the Tyvek material that might be more advantageous than paper itself. I don't know. Let's try it. Well, first we'll try the outside surface of the Tyvek. It's 9 by 12, which basically barely fits the carriage of the Hermes rocket. Let's see what we got here. So my initial thoughts are it looks very inky. Almost like the Tyvek is kind of absorbing the ink better than paper does, which is very interesting. I wonder how this is going to work on a different typewriter, maybe one that doesn't type quite as darkly. And now here is the inside. And as you might be able to tell, it's even darker than on the front side. So the front side is like that. The inside is even darker, and the letters are starting to get a little too sloppy even. The outside surface takes the ink a little bit less darkly than the inside surface, but both of them are quite dark, and in fact the inside surface it takes the ink so dark that it's almost too wet or too inky. There is kind of a cushioning effect of the Tyvek compared to regular paper, almost like maybe it offers some kind of cushioning of your platen. If you have a hard platen, we're going to have to test that. Let's just try my makeshift cleaning wipe that's been dried out. I don't think it's going to work good because it's not real papery like Paul's was here in his letter. But let's see if I can thread this in the typewriter. It's more like trying to put Kleenex into a typewriter. Why would you want to do this to begin with? What was the reason? Oh, it's just something fun to try. And it looks like it's not feeding very well through the carriage, through the ribbon vibrator area. This might make a better cleaning cloth for the typewriter, actually. Well, it looks pretty sloppy, but hey, let's just see if it'll take ink. Well, it's not really that good. It does make some kind of a impression. It's not really too bad, but it's not nearly the same quality as the pieces that Paul shipped me that are done on these little more papery like wet wipes. So if you have some old papery wet wipes, the kind that fold up in little envelopes and they're dried out, try it like he did, but don't use these wet wipe thingies. They're too much like springy, spongy cloth. But while we're at it, while we're in the mode for failure, let's try our dryer sheet. Now, as I said earlier, if all else fails, the dryer sheet can offer a stinky old typewriter an opportunity to smell a little bit less stinky, or at least you can cover up the smell with, some fragrance there that you may not want, but we'll see. So this particular material is very gauze-like, and it doesn't really cover very well. It has a lot of openings in the weave, but it makes an imprint, and it might be an artsy little thing that you could do for someone's wedding, maybe a little wedding card note or something like that. It is kind of artsy looking, but the material is so gauze-like and it doesn't really cover very well. So yeah, it's kind of an experimental technique, but I wouldn't be writing the great American novel on this thing. Okay, since we're doing it, we'll try the white restaurant napkin. And this is going to be not much better, I think, than the dryer sheet. So yeah, the restaurant napkin, it's actually readable. And the only problem with this as typing paper is I just can't imagine the scenario where it's late at night, you're at Denny's or some kind of 24-hour diner, and you have a typewriter with you and you forgot to bring typing paper. I mean, that would have to be the only reason you would be doing this, other than just to do it. But it is actually fairly readable, surprisingly. But it's just not very good material, and it's hard to thread in a typewriter. I'm not even going to try the brown restaurant napkin. There's no point in going forward. Well, there's no better typewriter to do this experiment on than the MJ Roy typewriter. I haven't really featured this typewriter very much on this channel, but you notice how thin it is. It actually did not originally come with a brass handle. This was one that I made. It had like a plasticky little handle that was all kind of warped and looks like it was made from really poor plastic. But the main part of the typewriter is pretty heavy, and it opens up. Let's see if I can do this properly here. Oh yeah, there's a little latch here on the bottom, and then you flip it over and you have a typewriter. So this is made in France sometime after World War II. It has a little fold-out carriage return lever that reminds me a lot of the Hermes rocket. In fact, I don't even know if this will type any good. Like I say, it hasn't been used in a long time. Okay. And as you might be able to tell, the imprint is not all that dark on this paper with this ribbon. It's been sitting in the closet for a long time, maybe a year or more without being used. Okay, let's try the Tyvek and see how it works. So not really that bad of an imprint. I'm surprised. So the good is that it does actually make a pretty nice imprint even on this really rock hard platen. The bad is the line spacing is still a problem. After a few lines you can see it starting to slip. So this Tyvek material is a little too slippery for a super rock hard platen. Well, I wonder what would happen if I put a backing sheet of paper, regular paper behind this that would help it not to slip. Well, okay, here's the Tyvek with paper behind it, regular printer paper. So the line spacing looks like it definitely is consistent now with a backing sheet of paper, and that's good. Well, I must say, actually, it is a nice dark imprint, and the line spacing remains consistently good with a backing sheet of paper. So, this Tyvek is actually making this old Roy Typewriter usable, which is kind of amazing. Since I mentioned it earlier, let's go ahead and do some aluminum foil typing. And my wife suggested, how about parchment paper? And yeah, I'm going to do both of them on the Roy, which is sort of the worst case scenario. Well, when you're doing aluminum foil typing, you have your choice of the dull side versus the shiny side. So let's try the shiny side first. Well, that's certainly interesting. Not necessarily super easy to read, but it certainly makes an imprint. And even on the back side. Well, it's interesting. It's a curiosity for sure. You wouldn't want to be writing the Great American Novel with it, but it is something you might be able to make into a little card, an insert to a card, something special like that. Kitchen parchment paper, not a good idea. Aluminium foil, only slightly better of an idea. So, no, I don't recommend using restaurant napkins unless you happen to be at Denny's at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to coffee your way out of a bender or something, and you happen to have your typewriter and no typing paper. That's the only scenario I can see. Other than that, you can always find some kind of paper, very inexpensive, recycled paper or whatever. I do like Paul's idea of using these dried out little wet wipes. It actually does work quite well. It has a gauzy, thin appearance. I could see a special purpose for this, maybe for some little insert, a poem or a verse inside of a greeting card or some kind of a card you're giving to somebody. But as far as the Tyvek material, I think it really has a place for a machine in a condition like the Roy Typewriter. A super rock hard platen feed rollers doesn't feed straight. No, this is really a super rock hard platen. With a backing sheet of paper, the line spacing is perfectly fine. It really does give a nice imprint, and it certainly protects the platen from more injury because the Tyvek is just going to be stronger than paper, doesn't punch through. This is a good alternative, and it really does make this typewriter usable. So why not? Okay. The Tyvek envelopes aren't cheap, so I'm not suggesting you should use this for typing a long piece, but it is a possibility. It's an alternative way of using a different kind of material as typing paper, and I think that's one of the fun things about mechanical typewriters is they are mechanical, they're physical, they make a physical imprint on a paper-like surface, and that gives us the alternative or the opportunity to use other alternative paper-like materials. Well, this was just a fun little video for me. I kind of like periodically revisiting alternative kinds of papers to use for typing on, and this is just another example. So maybe there's something to using Tyvek as a way to remedy a super bad typewriter that might give you a little bit more hope for making a good imprint. Throw down some ideas in the comments down below if you've had any other experiences with using other kinds of materials other than regular paper. I'd love to hear from you. Well, until next time, stay creative and have yourselves a great day, and yes, stay well also. Bye-bye for now.